Okay, so welcome to this first in-depth chat on resilience for my podcast. It's in conjunction with the Resilience Connection. Today I am talking with Andrew Hall, PhD, who has been in elite sport for over 20 years. Recently set up a executive coaching company. You're based in Hong Kong, aren't you, Andrew?
Yes, mate.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, my brain is working. Good. And remind me what your PhD was in again.
It was examining high-performing team cultures, establishing high-performing team cultures, ultimately. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this is
Right.
exactly why one of the many reasons we're chatting, really, because there's a lot to talk about and a lot of crossover, which is fantastic. Love it because yeah, every day's a school day and I want to learn every day. So this is what it's all about, to share the love with whoever's going to see this. Hopefully, at
Sure.
some point, it will be lots and lots of people will
Yeah, let's
learn.
hope so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, for sure. It's gonna
Oh,
be
my
great.
pleasure. My pleasure. It was kind of I suppose we were talking about this just now, how this has come about, how we got connected, and how this
Yeah.
whole thing's come about. So
It was yeah, 'cause it was on because on LinkedIn, I noticed you'd posted something on LinkedIn, and then someone who I hold in high regard liked it, and I thought, bloody hell, if this guy's liking this, it must be good. So having a little delve into it, and it coincided with, I think it was on self-compassion. I think you'd
yes,
posted
that's right.
self-compassion, and
Yeah.
I was doing a piece of work for a client on developing resilience and the central place that self-compassion has. And so it was great. And then it just spiraled my thinking a bit more. Then we connected and had another chat, and here we are. And here we are. So
Yeah, yeah. It's there are times when I really, really love technology. It
absolutely. And
just
there's a great example. There's a great example. And you're up in the Cairngorms, aren't you? Near there, but
not
we're my
not
father's old territory. So even better.
yes. I know. It's quite spooky, actually.
Yeah,
It's the world is increasingly shrinking, isn't it?
that's the way.
Yeah. So, to talk all things resilience,
Hmm.
I kind of I was going to mention, keep it into three chunks and then let it go wherever it goes within each chunk. So, before you got into the elite sports side of things, what was your, obviously with the joy of hindsight, what was your kind of your level of resilience? What do you think resilience was like for you before you started playing professional rugby?
Uh, I would say having a fairly comfortable upbringing, and I would, when I went to a comp school, it wasn't like we didn't go to a private school or anything like that, and didn't go to a massively reputable university, or any of didn't go through any of those, didn't have any of those experiences. But look, had a wonderful childhood, and then into my early adult life, and don't remember anything significant or any significant setbacks that would make me think, oh, at that point there, I was developing resilience. But even though I'm saying that, there'll be little things like when I don't know, 16, I didn't have my growth spurt playing rugby, my growth spurt as quick as everybody else.
Okay.
So everyone else was kind of talking in slightly deeper voices and a bit more muscle mass, and I was still up here a little bit. And I was told that season that I wasn't going to play. I wasn't going to be allowed to play from a safety perspective because everyone else got a bit bigger, and the coaches didn't think it was safe for me to do. And when you look back, I was actually quite forward thinking back then.
Yeah.
Uh, to separate me out of it. But that really, really bruised me at that point. And I guess, but then kept playing the game. I didn't stop my engagement in the game. So I don't know. Was that experience and then my actions after that an example of being resilient? I'm not sure. I would have had no idea of what this construct, what this was.
No.
And even moving into my professional playing career, I maybe I maybe wouldn't have tagged it as resilience. I may have been around, it would have been around confidence and, well, how do I deal with the fact that I haven't played well, or how do I deal with the fact that I didn't measure up to my expectations? And yeah, I would center it around that, around confidence and bouncing back from setbacks, which I suppose is what resilience is,
Yeah.
or part of it. I wouldn't have maybe have recognized it as such. Um, Interestingly, when we were in my second year, we were exposed to toughness and resilience sessions where
Interesting.
the coaches that were coaching our team at the time thought, right, we'll toughen this group up by exposing them to high levels of physiological military style exercises, really, in the hope that that experience in itself would be enough for us to say, as a group, to develop resilience. Now, I'm not sure to what extent that was or wasn't successful. I've got a pretty good idea. Uh, it maybe wasn't successful or didn't have the outcome that the coach had hoped. Um, so that was actually that word resilience. That was the first time I'd probably been exposed to it, and it was through the lens of they don't have it, so we're going to give it them.
You're going to
Um,
thrash it into them.
Pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What was that setback like for you when you didn't play for that at that level, continue at that level with the same guys?
When I was a youngster,
Yeah.
uh, it was softened a little bit because the coach said, "Look, you can still come and train, but when it comes to the games, we're not going to play." I was like, and it was, yeah. I mean, as as a 15 year old, so not not young, but still impressionable,
Yes.
young
Yeah, yeah.
teenager. Um, conscious of being part of groups, and I wasn't at a rugby playing school, so this was almost a special piece of my identity that I went every Sunday and
Okay.
played for a club. And it wasn't a school thing, so my schoolmates weren't part of this, and so it was almost a little bit extra for me, a bit special that, oh, I've got this thing, and these are my rugby friends and the rugby community I'm part of. But to be all of a sudden placed outside of that for
Yeah.
obviously the main bit, which was playing, was, yeah, it was, I suppose it was difficult at the time. Um, what was my response? I guess just got on with it, but I got on with it because I had support. I got on with it because my mum and dad would have been supportive about it. My brother, 2 years younger than me, would have been supportive of me in his own way as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would have got support through the coaches that had my best interest at heart. So I don't know. It's a long time ago, Simon. So, but I would say that was, when you talk about how the path is never linear, I would to success, and I had reasonable level of success in playing professionally. I would say that would have been on my trajectory, would have been a key point in my journey to say that was a point where I experienced the trauma, if you like, in that
Yeah, yeah.
context. Um, yeah, definitely would be part of my journey. So it must have had some impact.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it from similar experiences in my own way, it stings a bit when you're like, oh, I can't, damn, I'm not gonna. And as you talk, that identity piece and that cohesion of
Mm.
team cohesion, when you're taken out of that and watching from the outside, and they continue on and you're then that little bit of an outsider, it makes it difficult coming back in, or it can do.
Yeah, and I certainly that little theme of that continued as I kind of had a growth spurt and then I was back in the team, was able to play, and then there's some of a friend of mine, or yeah, a teammate of mine got selected for, it might have been Scotland, schools or Scotland, maybe under 18s. And, he came back from a training camp with the Scotland shorts on. I was like, oh God, this is like, I want a bit of that. Like I
Yeah.
want to be part of that. And again, not there at that point. That was again, it was like, oh God, when is this going to happen? Is this something that I'm on the right track here, or is this not going to be for me? Similar-ish theme for that from that point where I was told, yeah, you're not going to play this year.
Yeah, it's a yeah, it definitely it smacks and stings a bit, doesn't it, when it happens?
At the time, for sure. I'm
Yeah.
all right
Yeah.
now. I've
When I'm
moved
truly
on.
over
I've moved on. Yeah, yeah.
it. So what point did you transition into the professional side? How did that come about?
So it was so it would have been around about 1999, I think. So yeah, 1999. So I was at teacher trainer college. I was coming to the end of my second year, moving into my third year. And the club I was at the time, Moseley, who were in like the Birmingham Moseley, they're called now. They were in the second tier. I think it was called like Allied Dunbar Premiership 2 or something. So the second tier of English rugby, like other clubs at that period, people they transition for one night, they're amateur, and then the next day they become professional. And the club had gone through some turmoil in professionalism, had got a little bit of stability, and were offering full-time contracts. And I was a kind of product of their system. That's why I started playing my rugby. So I was offered a contract then, kind of 99 2000. So that was the first step into it. And I guess the next step up was when I moved to Glasgow and played and got signed for the Glasgow Warriors. That was in 2001. So
Okay.
that was the first step into God. This is professional rugby and rubbing shoulders and being colleagues, teammates with people I'd watched on TV and being
Yeah.
a bit kind of blimey, this feels quite good. And my mates from school going, oh, that's great. But what are you going to do when you finish? I'm like, well, I'm in my first summer of it. I don't know. Like we'll cross that hurdle
Yes.
whenever. It's miles away. I'm just going
Yeah.
to enjoy doing this for now. And that's what it certainly felt like in those early days.
Yeah, but it was how 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 much of a difference in performance level is there, or did you find at that point?
I think at that period when I became a professional rugby player, I think the game and the people that manage the game, coaches and administrators and performance, not that they had performance directors really at that point, were still understanding what it was all about. And I
Yeah.
perhaps only got an insight into what professional preparation and professional sport was about later on, maybe fast forward 10 years or so, where I had that responsibility of kind of head of performance roles and was schooled by someone who had experiences at World Cups,
Yeah.
and so I learned a lot from him. So at the time, you thought, "Wow, this is brilliant." I'm a full-time rugby player, and then even that you're going, "Oh, full-time, yeah, athlete and stuff." And what about we train in 3 different locations, and we don't have no one has the same kit yet. We don't really have enough kit to go around. And so it was still, that's no fault of anyone's. That was just the time. It was still finding its feet a little bit. Well, what is this professional sport?
Yeah.
Um, been amateur for over 100 years, hadn't it? And overnight, right, you now pay people. What did that look like? So I recognized the step up when I did it, when I was in it, but it was only till, fast forward, as I say, 10 years later, where I look back and go, actually, it probably wasn't high performance or high performing environment, um, as much as we maybe thought it was at the time.
Yeah, pretty in that storming phase.
Yeah, yeah, potentially. I think it was a knowledge phase,
Yeah.
or a learning as we go phase. And again, that's not a criticism. We had that early, those coaches, the coaches I first had at Glasgow were amazing,
Mhm.
nurturing, particularly as a young professional coming in.
Yeah.
And it was a bit daunting rubbing shoulders with these serial internationalists and British Lions and whatnot. It was daunting, but the coaches we had, former teachers, so they had an education background. I
Okay.
found, yeah, wonderfully nurturing that first year to help soften the step up, because it was a step up from what I was doing at my previous club. Yeah, no doubt.
So obviously rugby is you certainly become, if you're not beforehand, but you become very physically resilient
Hmm.
at sport because it's a tough, brutal sport. Which is why I love it. Uh, but in terms of the other side of it, that psychological resilience
Hmm.
and the emotional resilience that sometimes momentarily disappears during games.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
how did that was that something that was actually I don't suppose the emotional side was tapped looked at much, but the psychological resilience piece was that how much was that kind of deliberately worked on?
I would say it might have been implicit or unconsciously worked on.
Yeah,
It wouldn't. I would be surprised if it was if there were conversations happening around if there were conversations around the coaching table where they were spending time talking explicitly about psychological skills um, and where we were as a group or where we were as a individuals. I would say it might have been to a level, but nowhere near. Well, I then became exposed to off my own back when I felt it's probably emotionally and psychologically I'm nowhere near where I need to be to perform where I want to perform to. And
yeah,
I'm doing all this physical stuff. And there's some and the X's and O's of my game. There's probably stuff I can improve there. But that piece that back then was definitely the perception of what you're going to see a sports psychologist. What's the matter with you?
yeah. It's funny
As
that, isn't it?
as opposed to, and I think there's still maybe, I think it's far better. I think there's still maybe in certain circles a degree of that hangover still in place. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad. But it was one of the senior players, a guy called Jason White, uh, who I knew he used the sports psychologist, and I leaned into him and said, "Look, who is this guy?" And yeah, have you got his number? He's a guy called Tony Westbury who works at Edinburgh Napier, and I after meeting with him, and again in hindsight, one of the most significant people in my professional rugby journey, bar none.
Okay.
Meeting him and Tony introducing me to these developing these psychological skills as important, of course, as the other stuff you work on. And again, it was for me, it was around confidence. Like I was constantly referring and going back to stuff where I hadn't done well. I was, you know, I like it was a learned behavior actually from Moseley, where there was a player there who I looked up to, who was never, he always, whatever the result, even when he won, he always came in a bit grumpy about, his own performance. And
Yeah,
so what's the matter? You're not. Why are you so moody? Oh, I did this wrong, and I wasn't happy with this, and I thought, right, that's how you've got to be. You've got to be. You can never be happy with your performance. You've got to be. You've always got to be looking for the things that tripped you up and the things that limited your performance, rather than spending any time on what was good. And eventually, what was happening is that I was just chipping away at my self confidence. Ultimately, that would then and then of course that would manifest in little pockets of ill discipline in games, not throwing punches or nothing like that, but like just like daft penalties, trying too hard, trying to compensate. Um, and yeah, and I remember one game where I think I'd got another yellow card, and at the end of the game, I think my agent had come to watch the game. My uh, old man was at the game. At the end, I broke down. I was like, what am I doing? Like,
yeah.
doing so much in the week and trying to improve my game, and then that's what I deliver on a Saturday or Friday night, whenever it was. That was the point where I reached out to Jason and said, right, I need to sort this, because I can't keep doing this.
Yeah,
um, yeah.
yeah, and that's about obviously from your experience, but with the psychological resilience piece, if we're not have a grip of our emotions and can't manage our emotional states, then we do kind of have that fish out
Mm,
flopping around from one state to another without any real solid control over directing that energy in a constructive way,
sure.
which is
I see that.
unhelpful. But
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
I think some people naturally kind of learn that by default as they through life experience, and other people don't seem to ever manage to get a hold of it, do they?
No, yeah, yeah. I mean, thankfully, I grabbed it and said, right, well, this isn't working. so,
Yeah,
so let's, rather than do the same thing and expect a different result, let's take some action here and explore a little bit. I'm glad I did. Glad I did. As I say, it was significant. Just that the level of robustness I felt I then got. I was probably physically, because physically I wasn't very gifted. I'm not quick, not very powerful. Um, Decent skill set, but that work I was doing with Tony, he used to
yeah,
call it the ready brick effect, where I just felt this glow, like this. I'm going to be all right here, because the work I'd done with him,
yeah.
the
But
skills
great,
he was helping me develop.
yeah, yeah. I mean, great self-awareness at the outset, though. To be able to notice that within yourself
Mm.
and to have that level of acceptance that actually, all right, Christ, yeah, this isn't working. I need to do something different. What can I do? And actually being proactive for yourself. Don't always, it's not something you see to that degree very often.
No, and to your point, the point, the self-compassion thing around, the common humanity, like leaning into the social connections, leaning into people who are around, blimey, leaning into people around you. And let me just put 5 pence in the meter. Hang on. Here we go. Here we go.
That's
No,
brilliant.
no chance you editing that either, is there? Sorry about that.
I'm not that good, no.
But leaning into the people who are around you, that self-compassion, and particularly in an environment like in rugby, where, and I think the game has changed, but that cultural milieu of, get on with it, endure. You've got to,
Yeah,
don't show weakness here. You've got to, yeah, a level of self-sufficiency. And again, I think. I'd like to think the game has changed significantly in that regard. But at the time, again, maybe I wasn't aware of the perceptions of people, what the perception that people would have of me if I'm saying, oh, I'm going to see a sports psychologist. Because I think what helped to the fact that Jason White, who was like Scotland,
yeah,
he became the Scotland captain. He was a British Lion. You kind of go, well, if he's doing it, it's fine. That's fine by me. That's
yes,
fine by, you know.
yeah. A great example to set from him for sure,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
and not trying to hide it. Just yeah. This is yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this guy. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it and took action for sure.
Yeah, yeah. What in that respect, what were the key things you think were that helped develop your not the physical side, but that psychological resilience. What was it that came through from Tony that was kind of the
I
most
think
influential?
I think so parking stuff, so, or resetting, getting present. So errors, whether errors or successes, so inaction errors, or we've just scored, whatever it might be, or just conceded, whatever. Just that ability to go, right, what's next? So that internal dialogue, really. That was linked closely with visualization and imagery, like developing my key skills, but doing so through mental rehearsal.
Yeah.
Uh, that was probably the second kind of pillar, I guess. And the third one was, I suppose, targeting my self-confidence in my immediate after action review from training or games, because my confidence had taken, I'd given myself confidence a bit of a hit, was to reflect on everything, all the little stuff I'd done well. So
Yeah.
quickly just jot it down. Right, where was I? Where was I very, very good today? Where was I exceptional? Um, and get that on paper. That's not to say I ignored the things that was limiting in my performance. It just wasn't the first thing that I focused on.
Yes.
And they were probably the three psychological skills that potentially, I don't know, did they help build psychological resilience? Perhaps they do. Yes, they're probably the three key tools that I was introduced to. Which, part of the course these days, when you talk about, psychological skills develop for the development of excellence, that body of work, at the time for me it was new, and and you heard a little bit about it, but I had no idea of the impact and on performance and whatnot. So yeah, it was great.
Nice. That's how much how much did you get in terms of that experience from when you were younger, not making the team because you hadn't had the same growth spurt as everybody else, to being kind of on match day, game day, being on the bench and not
Wasn't even
necessarily
that.
coming
Wasn't even
off.
that at times. Yeah. Again, I don't think it's the experience in itself. It was definitely the people around me that helped me interpret what was happening in maybe a different way.
Yeah.
They, they one of the, another significant other in my rugby journey, guy called Andy Johnson, who was one of the coaches at Moseley Colts. He, just little throwaway comment it might have been for him, but for me it stuck. Getting off the bus, I think it was in reference actually to a mate of mine who had got, played for Scotland, and you get a pair of trainers with it, and you get your own kit and all this. As a 17, 18, that's it. That's the level. A nice bit of stash. And he just said, he said, good things come to those who wait, and then kind of walked off. But bloody hell, that stuck. I thought, right, okay, AJ, I'll keep working and we'll see what happens. So it wasn't, yeah, again, it wasn't the experiences, it was the people around me that were helping me unconsciously interpret things in a slightly different way,
Yeah.
rather than reinforcing potentially the negativity that might have existed within the experience.
Yes, because it a key piece that most people don't necessarily or are not necessarily aware of in developing resilience is having a good support network, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, it's subconscious, I guess. Uh, I had a supportive family around me, and so that it was, and you would always, as kids, you would always, if you weren't feeling too flash or you're having trouble, you could lean into your mum and dad or grandparents and stuff like that. So I feel fortunate that I was able to do that, and that definitely carried over. Like I had no problem saying, I'm struggling with this a bit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and absolutely, you cannot do it alone, can you? Whatever your endeavor.
No.
um, and it's okay to say, look, lean into the people around you.
Yes. And what's because thinking of kind of reframing that piece, whether if you're not, if you're on the, because I've done this
Um,
before. I forgot to start recording. I would talk for 20 minutes with somebody and had to go back and start again. Oh
horrendous. You don't want that, but don't worry,
no.
that's it. Uh, I'm not sure what we were talking about. What
The
were we
bit,
talking about?
the bit I was going to talk about is yeah. So do you know what? Sod it. I'm just going to leave this in. Apologies for the glitch. Technical errors, probably pilot error, but there we go. Um, the bit about being on the bench and reframing that in a positive way was the thing that was it Eddie Jones did when it calling them finishers,
Yeah,
which I think
yeah.
was a much better, was a really good solid way of reframing that because, bringing in fresh legs and muscle.
100%. Yeah, and I think definitely the perception of the bench before maybe that became a thing
Yeah,
or an explicit thing was if you're on the bench, it's because you're not as good as the person who were there, who was starting. And sometimes that might still be the case. I think more so now with that, it's more about the specific role that the coach wants you to play in the game, isn't it? And it
yeah,
might require you then to come on a bit later anyway. But yeah, that's an example of just framing a situation a slightly more positive way that isn't out of the realms of a possibility either. You're not bullshitting yourself. You know,
yes,
framing that, or framing it in that particular way. But it's certainly, and again, when I reflect on the other little things, so one of my best mates, we used to train at one of the local clubs in the summer, and again, he'd had his Mother Nature had given him his testosterone, so he was a bit more prepared for it all, and we used to train with the men's team. So our respective dads used to coach the team, and
right.
and when it came to contact, he was able to continue, and I had to step out, and I was like, God. I felt that was almost more frustrating than not playing because we were a little bit older then, I think. But there were, yeah, these common threads of just not quite ready for it. Um, yeah, but again, don't want to repeat, but yeah, the framing of that experience helped it to be uh, an incident, a circumstance that I think grew from, as opposed to having a negative impact.
Yeah, yeah. It's massively important, because you can really chip away at people's confidence if it's not done in a constructive way.
Hmm,
And the whole point is to, particularly as you high performance teams, you want people to grow from it and learn from it rather than be beaten down.
absolutely. Yeah.
Thankfully, those days are mostly gone. I hope. I'd like to think so these days with what we have
Yes.
available to us.
Yeah. Yeah. But giving people the skills to be able, psychological skills to be able to deal with whatever that bit is, and that bit, of course, as well, dealing with the successes as well. It's, I guess, when I think resilience, I think of dealing with setbacks. So dealing with
Yep.
setbacks. But I think there's also the space to consider. Okay, how do I ensure I don't fall in love with my wins as well? There's something to be said for
Yeah.
that. Um, uh, but yeah, that's maybe not. Let's maybe dive into that another day.
Yes. Well, I had one boss once who definitely led from the front and was great at maintaining a high performing team. And he coined this thing and started this thing called Fuck Up Friday, which is about being, humility, vulnerability, having that self-compassion, but taking the piss out of each other, but
Hmm.
trying to outdo each other with who had the best fuck up for the week.
Okay, yeah,
So we
yeah.
would had one specific time to focus on mistakes, but the rest of the week was focusing on learning and growing.
Yeah, yeah, and interesting, isn't it? Because you have kangaroo courts and all that kind of stuff, and Dick of
Yep.
the Dead and all this kind of stuff. Well, I went to a dinner once in Hong Kong a few years ago now, and it was an Australian rugby player. Oh, whose name escapes me. Who and it was called a blue tie ball. So it was about mental health in
Okay.
Drew Mitchell, I think. I think it was Drew Mitchell. And he was talking about how they changed the mindset that rather than having a pop at where someone mucked up, they flipped it around and go, well, let's highlight when someone was awesome. When
Yes.
did they go over and above? Um, and and yeah, that was like, oh bloody hell, yeah. Why did we always celebrate the times where we've mucked up and who made an idiot of themselves? Because that's always been the way. Uh, That's not to
Yeah.
say we don't do that, and it's not to say you make it. You know, yeah, you ignore that stuff. I suppose it's just having that balance, isn't there? And um, yeah, don't know where I was going with that. Anyway.
So the next chapter. So all that kind of overall that global resilience building that happened through your professional career, when it came, did you make the decision to break away from it, or was it something that was
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, like I'd left the, so I moved to the Dragons for so 4 years at Glasgow, a year at Moseley, started things off. 4 years at Glasgow, 4 years down at the Dragons in Wales. Then after that, I had one more year at Moseley, which I suppose nice to finish, to top and tail where it started, end where I started. I did enjoy that year really, and that was on me. Like I didn't play well, and I
okay?
think I was, yeah, maybe saw the fact that I was, the back legs were going a bit, and it was ready to stop. But then the opportunity came as I was contemplating what was next from a playing perspective, and if there was opportunities, what was next. There was something came up in Hong Kong
Okay.
from a direct link with the people I work with, the coaches I work with in the Dragons in Wales. So that got me to yeah, that got me to the next step in Hong Kong. So not completely out of the sport and not completely transitioning away from sport, which can be really difficult. At least I was staying in the game,
Yeah.
and starting my journey in coaching, which the experience in Hong Kong was magnificent in developing my coaching career. Yeah.
Of all the different teams that you've been involved in, which area was that? That's Hong Kong's been the most.
Yeah, like, and all my coaching's been based out here as well. So I moved as a player coach for a for one of the Premiership teams, and at the time, Hong Kong was pushing their performance platform really to
Okay.
get. Yeah, Hong Kong was synonymous with the Sevens as an
Yes,
event,
absolutely.
but not necessarily with the teams that played in the region. So I suppose I started involvement with the rugby union when all these ideas of accelerating the performance platform were starting to take place, right to the end where we'd achieved a level of performance of a performance environment that then had to finish because of funding off the COVID-19. So, and they're now just finding their feet again, and again they're on the way up again. So to be part of that initial, right, we're going for this, and transition from a very much an amateur-based sport with amateur mindsets to a performance mindset. That education I had in those various roles that I had as the game itself was getting more professional was great. And again, the people I was here with who helped that in that education. There's a theme here, definitely, with influential people as well. Uh,
Yes.
they were they were central to that education as well, unequivocally. Yeah.
Nice. And there's been, so in terms of the different teams you play for, who, so you talked about when you were at Glasgow, was that where you with Tony Westbury,
Yeah, yeah, and I kept my connection. I
Jason?
kept my connection with Tony when I went to the Dragons as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, it doesn't matter, does it really? You can be,
No,
but
no. So I was
um,
involved with Scotland on the peripherals of the Scotland team from about 2002 till 2006, seven. It would have been so
okay.
about 5 years of the periphery of the Scotland squad. So I managed to get one cap uh, early on in my time in Glasgow, and then had like a dozen or so A caps and a couple of, and a few, half a dozen non-cap games. When you go on tour, you're not quite in the test team, but you're part of the squad.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was still a Scottish connection. And Tony was still part of my kind of, I suppose, my little support circle, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, but it's but get your thoughts on this actually, because in terms of resilience as a team, not just as an
Mm.
individual. I mean, rugby successes come in cycles, don't they? Within, Wales have had their day. They're not quite there at the moment. Um, Scotland had its day in the 80s, and they're on definitely on a quite a trajectory at the moment. They're playing
Mm.
extremely well, and they're on the up. But I think, what do you think? Italy as a team to continue playing with the heart and the ferocity that they've played at when they've lost so many times, but continuing on has been quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and I don't think it's by accident, and not that I know this in any great detail. I think it's a similar mindset to what Ireland had done, where looking after so from the ground up.
Yes.
So if you look at Italy's under 20s teams, and I think particularly under 20s have been very strong for a long period, and that has allowed people to flow up into the full international team.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a big part of their relative success. I think that they've still, yeah. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of that, Simon, and what the reasons for, but I certainly think that's part of it. And obviously they're now part of what was the Celtic League, that URC
Yeah.
competition involved, always involved with Europe, but that certainly helped bring their domestic game up a level, which obviously then has an impact on the international game.
Yes.
I think a central pillar in their success has been uh, their age group stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that the All Blacks have had for a very long time, isn't it? That's been it's a religion.
Yeah, and that's where and of course then you're not comparing apples and pears there, because you're quite right. So uh, yeah, it is like it is in Wales, New Zealand and Wales, where places like Italy, that they're not. It's obviously the round ball game, isn't it, in Italy?
Yeah.
So it's difficult to compare the two in the same breath. Yeah, yeah, but good. It's um, good for the game in Europe, isn't it? That you've got, and the Six Nations, that you've got stronger teams. You
Yes.
can't be a two-tier competition. It would lose its appeal.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So in terms of what you what would we say with apart from those psychological skills in particular that you got from Tony, what
Mm.
from your professional career, what's been the most what have you taken with you from that's helped you in your running your own coaching business? And is there anything that kind of you've had to let go of because it's not really transferred well?
Uh, it's interesting that the parking of stuff, like parking of error, right? Bury it. Don't need to forget it. Like that particular strategy hasn't always been good outside of the 80 minutes on a game, or the 90 minutes on a training field.
Yeah.
The kind of I'll just forget about it and move on. Maybe hasn't been appropriate techniques outside of professional sport.
Okay.
So, um, but I would still have used it.
Yeah.
Um, because again, learned behavior. So that probably that probably hasn't worked. Along, the psychological skills, the key people you surround yourself with, and also I'd always had a something else happening alongside my 9 to 5, if you like, which was encouraged through the coach at the Dragons. Said, right, I was 24 at the time. What are you doing outside of your responsibilities as a professional rugby player because you've got a lot of time. How are you upskilling yourself? And they sold it. They sold it with the performance lens. Like if you have something else, it'll help your day to day. It'll help you in your
Yeah.
performance here. So that I was sold on that massively. And certainly since then, this is linked to resilience. I'm not sure. I've always had a something else. Whatever my core role has been, I've always had something else running alongside it.
Yeah.
Whether it was additional qualifications, going back to uni, doing the PhD, whatever it might have been, just as something else to keep, I don't know, keep balance, I guess. And
Yes.
it might be around that self-care. Again, you go back to self-compassion. It might have been that the self-care piece around, again, unconsciously going, well, I perform better when I haven't just got one thing I'm focusing on. I know if I balance my energies sensibly, that makes me. I then fuel that's good fuel for me.
Yeah.
So maybe it was an unconscious or yeah, yeah, an unconscious way of developing my resilience from that regard. What did I need to fuel my self-care, if you like,
Yeah.
my self-care. Part of that is, yeah, having something on. So to keep your head ticking over and challenge yourself. Maybe that was the other thing as well, Simon. But I've only actually probably picked up on in the last 30 seconds, as in identifying it as maybe that was, self-care for me, my recipe. When you think of, I suppose, self-compassion, developing resilience, that might have been part of my self-care recipe.
Nice.
Mm. Having something else, a positive distraction, it was called. It was pitched to us, yeah, that landed for me massively.
Yeah, I think having what there's time and a place for having one sole focus. But I think I think you hit it with that word balance. It gives you
Yes.
and a positive distraction. It's good it gives you a break from the thing that you're focusing on the
Yeah.
majority of the time. And it's refreshing, isn't it? It's a
Absolutely. That's what I felt actually when went back to uni, did a master's at Cardiff Met, UWIC it was then, while I was at the Dragons. And it coincided with absolutely my best periods of rugby as a professional. I did it for 10 years. I didn't it was a massive career, but the time when I was doing a 3-year part-time master's and the rugby, that coincided with my best rugby. And it wasn't like I was scraping by with the Masters either. That was doing all right as well. And also, you're right. It wasn't like I was then, about to call a line out playing a game and thinking, what's my, how's my, lit review going in my thesis draft. Of course, it wasn't like that either. I was able to, well, this is important now. This deserves my attention now, and this deserves my attention in this space. Again,
yes.
that balance I think is important. It lifted both. It wasn't
Yeah.
inexpensive. At no time did I think, "Oh God, this is suffering because." And it was central. That was that positive distraction,
Yeah.
100%.
Hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, and it's continued, and it's you can overdo it, can't you? And I'm aware of
Yeah.
constantly looking for something else, like even a journey home, or in the journey to work. Like, right, what podcast am I going to have on today, or what am I going to? It's actually all right to have nothing on, or just tune into Chris Evans from the day before on Virgin and
Yeah.
listen to. It's all right just to zone out. You don't always constantly have to be getting new stuff in, and that's not good either. So I'm aware of that as well. Which I
That's
suppose
that that comes with practice though, doesn't it? That level of self-awareness takes time.
yeah. And I'm still aware of it and go, doss on it, play. Right, let's get on. So I've still got a bit of improvement the thinking and then the action. Yeah, I've still got a bit of work to do there. But yeah, I think I've got, yeah, I think I'm I've learnt to strike that balance, certainly
Yeah.
with that particular piece anyway.
Yeah, we're constant work in progress, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So in terms of what you're doing now, what sort of who are you working with now?
Yeah, I'm non-industry specific, I guess. I'm not, I don't particularly say, right, this context or this domain. I think my own, I suppose, MO has been, and it's come out a little bit in this conversation, a touch maybe, is my personal pursuit of progress. Like I'm looking for ways, and okay, well, how do I get slightly better here? What have I learned from this, and how do I advance that, whatever that might be? And I guess I work with people, individuals and clients who have similar feel, actually, right? That pursuit of progress. Where can my team, where and how can my team look to improve individually? The individual clients I work with, again, it's a similar theme. Okay, there might be separate themes, but it's all about progress, and it's all about moving forward. Um, so yeah, that's who I work with, really. Is there a drive and desire for progress? Well, that's a great starting point. And then we get into the nuances, really, of, well, what does that look like for them? Rather than going, well, here's my slide deck of the stuff I do. I say,
Yeah.
well, that's very interesting, but not what we need. Always lead with that kind of a diagnostic conversation, or ultimately a coaching conversation around, well, what is it they need from the service ultimately, rather than
Yes.
flogging programs and whatnot. That's important, I think, as well. So because it is bespoke. Every team and individual I've worked with, well, particularly individuals, of course, but with the teams, yeah, there might be similar challenges and similar themes that they want to address, but it's still nuance. It's never copy and paste, as we know.
No,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. The cookie cutter approach doesn't work.
hmm,
Really doesn't.
no.
Um,
Um, so that's what I'm doing, and it's Hong Kong, and also a client in the UK as well. So yeah, it's almost a year in, going going well, but more to
Good.
come. Pursuit of progress.
Every day. Yes. Yeah, it is a relentless pursuit, isn't it?
I enjoy it though. It's good.
Yeah, when doing your own thing and have with the life and work experience you've had makes and obviously your academic pursuits as well puts you in a fantastic position. You've taken a few hard knocks in life that
Yeah,
that have
yeah, yeah.
tested you.
Um, yeah, it's good, and it's a slightly different. It's a fresh perspective, isn't it? And it's not for everyone. I get that, but for those that it is, I also see that there's certainly value in this perspective. Not that I am, again, thrusting the sporting perspective on people. Just allows me to yeah, it just allows me to listen to things and maybe view things in with a slightly different lens, doesn't it? To the traditional business route, which is yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's horses for courses, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely,
That's the
absolutely,
thing.
yeah,
So, so from you thinking about the that chunky resilience piece,
yeah.
what's the what would you say would be the key things for people to focus on to to become aware of their resilience, where they're at, and how resilient they are, and what they can do to continue developing that and to maintain it when they're under the cosh. That's the test, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, and again, you talk about, especially, yeah, horses for courses. There, what's worked for me, it might not work for other people, but the road, talk about a road to Damascus moment when I sliding doors fell on the self-compassion piece. That for me was like, bloody hell. Okay, rather than this resilience happening organically. So developing resilience, let's say we think of it as a skill, developing it purely through an exposure to a setback, let's say.
Yeah.
right? We experienced that. Or when we did toughness and resilience sessions, we had a period of time where it was forced upon us, right? Exposing them to this high levels of physical and psychological stress, the output will be resilience and understanding, in hindsight, you understand, well, that wasn't, that's probably not the best way of doing it, if at all, for building it in a sustainable way and one that, one that you can actually lean on and one that's robust. The self-compassion thing for me has been enlightening around, those three pillars around the self-awareness, the mindfulness. I kind of think of it as self-awareness. If I think mindfulness, people tend to maybe think, if you think mindfulness, oh, it's meditation. Oh, yeah, okay. I get that kind of stuff. But I
Yeah.
think self-awareness piece just maybe opens it out a little bit more and thinking of, right, well, I'm aware of how I'm feeling in any given moment. Oh, hang on, what are the symptoms now I'm feeling that say to me, I'm under pressure a bit here, or there's some stresses hitting me here. How do I pull myself? How do I pull myself back? How do I switch? Those, broadly emotional brain starting to get behind the wheel here. How do I just readdress that balance a bit? So that first bit of self-awareness, I think, had landed with me, and then the common humanity, the fact that you can't do it together, and even reading some stuff around this, the simple reflection of there are other people experiencing this same emotion linked to this incident.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling this alone. Even that reflection can help kind of diffuse the negative emotions surrounding the setback, if you like.
Yeah.
So, but leaning into your support, leaning into the people around you, that you cannot do it alone. I think that jumped out. And again, the self-care. What's my recipe to ensure that my cup's full as it can be? That they're the biggest things, Simon. Well, that's the biggest thing that I've learned recently. And
Yeah.
it's almost like, oh, if I had that, I wonder what I would have done differently if I'd had that understanding back when I started.
Yeah. 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 I can relate to a few moments like that. If only.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, that would be, I hope that's answer your question. Yeah, that would be my big learning with resilience. It might not necessarily be from my experiences, although again, that thread of key people, helping you to reframe the experience,
Yep.
I think has been helpful in the past. Um, but yeah, that self-compassion, it's and also actually in dealing with the whole compassion, this care, and well, hang on, can you have that as well as driving people and expecting high standards of people, expecting high standards of yourself and others? If there's this softer, caring, compassionate approach, well, yeah, we know that we can't we? And they're not
Yep.
mutually exclusive, and they can coexist. And it's probably in the presence of the compassion and care that allows you to demand a lot of yourself and demand a lot of others over this prolonged period of time, without there being the burnout issues and whatnot, because you're coming with this level of compassion and care. Yeah, I think it's anything but a soft approach, actually.
Yeah.
uh,
I I
it's
agree.
not it's not the expense of hard work. It's not at the expense of critical feedback and being having those honest conversations. Um, yes, you're doing it so in a compassionate way.
Yeah, and it's not a soft, flowery, weak approach as some people might think. What would you say to people who have that kind of perspective on it and see self-compassion?
Yeah, I mean, look at there's some great examples out there, like in successful individuals. And I look for the world of sport. You look at Pete Carroll, and he might not explicitly say, "Oh yeah, I lead with self-compassion," but Pete Carroll, that his behaviors and the stuff that's written about him, you go, well, there's someone that leads with a compassionate approach.
Yes.
There's someone that has care at the heart of it. He was successful, deeply successful. Look at is it Steve Kerr at the moment? His work with the who's the basketball team? The Golden State Warriors. You can see he's leading with a bit of care, and at the same time, still bloody has high standards you have to follow. Phil Jackson. And I'm looking at all the American sports here, but Phil Jackson, I thought ahead of his time. He leads with care. Is it Serena Weigman, England football, England women's football? She leads with compassion.
Yeah.
From what I understand, what you read about her, and you recognize in them, it's not. This isn't a soft, sort of soft approach. It's not. It's not a instead of being, instead of demanding the highest of standards. You forget that because you just got to be caring. No, they two can coexist.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say, well, look, there's plenty of examples out there and if it might not be for them, that's okay. But the other thing is, if you don't lead, let's look at self-compassion. If you don't lead with self-compassion, and you lead with this, that inner voice who's deeply critical and is overly harsh and deprecating, and you don't lead with, don't fuel yourself with this compassion and self-kindness and care. It's with fear or this fear element. It's an expensive way to fuel yourself.
Yeah.
And I get that some people are driven like that. Mind, I've worked with some great people who would say, look, I'm fear driven. That's my upbringing. That's where I'm from. And I get that. And yeah, this isn't and that's the other thing I would say is, there are nuances with this, that it might not be for everybody.
Sure.
Of course. But that stuck with me. I think reading around a little bit, it's the expensive way to fuel yourself if you're always living on that. Come on, that was shit. You got to be better, and I must do this. I have to do that, as opposed to framing it with maybe that more compassionate lens. That's expensive. Running yourself like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's sacrifices to be made.
If they were still listening.
Well, geez, I mean, we've touched on a lot, not just touched on, we've deep dived on a few things here that I think people will take a lot from, even if it's just one thing. Then, today it's been a useful conversation. It's been useful for me. Christ, I've loved this.
Thanks, Simon.
Really
I've enjoyed just having a think about it as well, because it's interesting. Some of the stuff I wouldn't have considered, and how it links resilience and other stuff we've talked about today. It hasn't just been about that, has it?
No.
But yeah, thank you for probing and prompting me and shivering me along and keeping me reasonably on task.
Well, I can't promise I can keep myself on task most of the time. So, yeah, team effort.
There we go. Thank you.
Yes, well, thanks, mate. I mean, I will put all your details. We'll stick in so people can get in touch with you in whatever way you want and ask you questions, and maybe even want to work with you. Hopefully, that would be the cherry on the cake. That'd be fantastic.
Great,
my pleasure, and appreciate your insight and wisdom and experience today.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Enjoyed it. It was good. Thanks, Simon.
Brilliant. Cheers, Andrew.
Catch you soon.